The stage was set, the audience eagerly waiting for a night filled with excitement, tension, and drama. The Pulse, a late-night show known for its celebrity guests and political discussions, had never quite seen anything like this. As the bright studio lights flashed on, the excitement in the air was palpable. Cameras zoomed in as the studio audience settled into their seats, their eyes glued to the stage. At the heart of the room, standing at the center stage, was the charismatic Samantha Pierce, the seasoned host of the show. With a sharp professional smile, she had been a fixture of the Pulse for years, her ability to steer difficult conversations into compelling television unmatched. Her reputation for navigating heated debates and pulling out the juiciest moments from her guests had made her one of the most trusted hosts in the industry. Tonight, though, she faced a challenge like no other. She was about to host Chris Rock, the legendary comedian whose biting humor had often drawn both applause and controversy, and Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary who had taken on the role of defending not just the Trump administration, but also its most controversial figures. The stage was set for a confrontation that would have the potential to captivate millions. As the countdown clock hit 0, the theme music of The Pulse blasted through the speakers and the audience erupted into applause. Samantha Pierce, standing at the podium, gave a professional nod before speaking into the microphone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of The Pulse. Tonight we have two very special guests," she said, her voice steady and filled with anticipation. "A man known for his sharp wit and unapologetic humor, Chris Rock." The audience cheered, clapping wildly. "And joining us from the White House, a woman whose words carry immense weight on the national stage, Karoline Leavitt," Samantha continued, her voice now taking on a more serious, almost reverent tone. Another round of applause followed, though it was notably quieter this time. Karoline Leavitt's presence in the room immediately shifted the atmosphere, the tension rising. She wasn't just any political figure. She was a force to be reckoned with, known for her meticulous handling of difficult press questions, her ability to stay composed under fire, and her knack for taking down adversaries with well-researched, fact-based arguments. In the audience, the buzz grew louder. People were already whispering about what might unfold. Could Chris Rock, arguably one of the greatest comedians of his generation, hold his ground against a White House press secretary known for dismantling her critics with surgical precision? Or would Karoline Leavitt find herself out of her depth in a world where jokes were weapons and the crowd was an unforgiving judge? The tension in the room was thick, almost electric. As the applause subsided, Samantha Pierce gestured to her guests. "Chris, Karoline, thank you both for joining us tonight," Samantha began, her tone warm but with an undertone of curiosity. "We've seen you both on TV, but tonight we're taking it to a new level. Let's see if we can shake things up a bit. Chris, last week you had the entire country in stitches with your joke about Melania Trump. Can you explain what you meant when you said she might be looking for a way out of her marriage?" The question was poised with the perfect balance of curiosity and intrigue, but it was also loaded, setting the stage for what was sure to be an explosive discussion. Chris Rock didn't need an introduction. His name alone had the power to command attention. For decades, Rock had been at the forefront of American comedy, known for his edgy, often controversial humor. His comedy specials, stand-up routines, and acting roles had made him one of the most influential figures in entertainment. But Rock wasn't just known for his jokes. He was known for pushing boundaries. His jokes often took on politics, race, and social issues with an unapologetic approach that many found both hilarious and thought-provoking. Yet, not everyone was a fan of his style. His sharp critiques and willingness to go for the jugular were both what made him a household name and what often landed him in hot water. His ability to blend humor with social commentary set him apart from other comedians, and it was that very skill that made his comments on Melania Trump so impactful. When Rock joked about Melania Trump during a previous stand-up performance, it wasn't just a laugh, it was a statement. He wasn't just poking fun at the First Lady, he was making a pointed commentary about the marriage itself. Rock's humor often focused on the absurdity of powerful people and the contradictions in their public personas. Melania Trump, with her cool, distant demeanor, provided ample material for Rock to exploit in his usual no-holds-barred fashion. The joke he made on The Pulse about Melania not being the First Lady, but rather a model trapped in a marriage contract, was just one example of his ability to take a complex, often sensitive issue and turn it into comedic gold. But like many of Rock's best jokes, it was a double-edged sword. What made people laugh also stirred controversy. On the opposite side of the stage stood Karoline Leavitt, a woman who had risen through the ranks of American politics to become one of the most recognizable faces of the Trump administration. Leavitt wasn't your typical press secretary. She had a reputation for being calm, collected, and fiercely protective of the president. Her responses to the media were calculated, precise, and often left little room for argument. Before becoming press secretary, Leavitt had worked her way up in the political world, serving as a senior advisor and spokesperson for various Republican campaigns. Her sharp intellect and ability to handle difficult questions had earned her a place at the highest levels of government, where she was tasked with defending the administration's actions, no matter how controversial they may have been. For many, Karoline Leavitt was seen as the voice of reason in an administration known for its chaos. Her poise under pressure and her unflappable demeanor made her a favorite of political commentators and a source of frustration for the press. She had become a formidable force, able to turn the tables on anyone who challenged her or her bosses. Tonight, Leavitt wasn't here to play. She wasn't going to let Chris Rock's jokes go unchallenged. As the press secretary for the White House, her job wasn't just to manage the press, it was to protect the image of the administration, including that of Melania Trump. And defending the First Lady was a task she took very seriously. With the bright studio lights casting a soft glow over her perfectly styled hair and sharp suit, Leavitt looked every bit the political powerhouse she was. She sat down with poise, her eyes never leaving Rock. Her hands clasped together in front of her, fingers tapping lightly on the table as she waited for him to speak. Chris Rock, ever the showman, didn't hesitate. He turned toward Samantha Pierce, a grin playing on his lips as he prepared to dive into his signature brand of humor. Look, Samantha, Melania is the real First Lady, right? The problem is she's locked in a marriage contract. I mean, can you imagine being stuck in a house with Donald Trump every day? He paused for effect, letting the audience soak in his words. I bet every night she stands in front of a mirror practicing "I'm fine" in 5 languages, while secretly praying for a hurricane to sweep him away, just like his bankrupt casino. The crowd erupted into laughter, a wave of amusement washing over the studio. Samantha Pierce gave an approving nod, but she was aware that the fun was about to end. This was where the real confrontation was about to begin. Leavitt's icy stare remained unwavering, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she calmly turned toward the audience and prepared herself for what would no doubt be a battle of wits. The laughter from the crowd still echoed in the studio, but the energy in the room began to shift as Chris Rock leaned back in his chair, his confident smirk never leaving his face. He was in full control of the stage, playing the crowd like a well-tuned instrument. With the microphone in hand, he added more fuel to the fire. Seriously, though, Rock continued, his voice rising with a playful challenge, I've seen Melania at those press briefings. She stands there, looking at Donald like he just asked her to explain quantum physics. She's probably thinking, I traded Milan Fashion Week for this guy who stared into an eclipse like a deer caught in headlights. The crowd roared once again, some even standing in applause. The room buzzed with excitement as Rock's words resonated with the audience, striking a chord with their sense of humor and cynicism toward the president and his marriage. Samantha Pierce, ever the skilled host, leaned forward, looking intently at Chris as if she were trying to decipher his every word. But Chris, she interjected, keeping her tone playful but tinged with curiosity, you've got some stats to back this up, but don't you think that's taking it a bit far? Rock turned to her with a raised eyebrow, his grin widening. Samantha, I haven't even started. Trump thinks he's the King Midas of America, but everything he touches goes bust, from casinos to airlines to this marriage. You really think that's the best deal in history? Melania is the living proof of how Trump can turn gold into rust. The crowd erupted into laughter again. Rock's words were sharp, but they resonated with many of the audience members who had watched Trump's business ventures falter time and time again. But the fun didn't last long. Karoline Leavitt was about to make her move. From stage right, the calm but powerful presence of Karoline Leavitt stepped into the spotlight. The moment her heels clicked against the studio floor, the energy in the room shifted. The playful atmosphere that Chris Rock had worked so hard to create suddenly turned tense. The audience hushed, sensing that things were about to take a sharp turn. Leavitt's entrance wasn't just a physical one, it was a strategic move. Dressed in a navy suit with her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, Leavitt exuded authority and control. Her icy gaze swept across the room, briefly locking eyes with Rock. She didn't speak immediately, instead allowing the silence to stretch, amplifying the tension between the two. Rock, never one to shy away from a challenge, leaned into his microphone, a sly grin still on his face. "Oh, look, Trump's personal rescue squad just showed up. What's next, Karoline? Gonna call the Secret Service to arrest me for making the crowd laugh, or are you gonna hand me that contract Melania signed by mistake? You know, for a quick read?" The crowd chuckled nervously, unsure of how this exchange was about to unfold. Leavitt, however, remained unflinching. She was composed, calm, and ready to respond. She sat down across from Rock, hands lightly resting on the table, her fingers tapping with measured precision. The audience waited, sensing that a storm was brewing. Samantha Pierce, sensing the rising tension, quickly turned to Leavitt. "Karoline, Chris just made some bold claims about Melania and the president. What's your take on all of this?" Leavitt's voice was steady, but there was a quiet intensity beneath it. "Chris, you think you can stand here and make up stories about the First Lady's life, using humor as a shield for your slander. But let me set the record straight. Melania Trump is not a luxury prisoner, as you so graciously put it. She's a dedicated woman who has worked tirelessly in her role as First Lady, representing the United States both at home and abroad." The audience held its breath, waiting for Rock's reaction. Leavitt continued, her words deliberate and powerful. "Since taking on this role, Melania has hosted over 50 charity events, met with more than 30 heads of state, and represented America on 15 international trips. Those aren't the actions of someone trapped in a marriage. That's a woman who has shown incredible strength and dedication." The crowd was split, some nodding in agreement, while others looked unsure of how to respond. Rock, now on the back foot, tilted his head and flashed a mocking grin. "Oh, 50 charity events? That's impressive, Karoline, really. But how many times has Melania looked at Trump like she's ready to break free from that golden cage? I bet that number is way higher." Leavitt didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Rock. "Chris, you want to talk about looks? Fine. I see a woman who stood by her husband through every campaign, through every criticism, and through the toughest days in the White House. You, on the other hand, are standing here, hiding behind your mic, trying to make a name for yourself at someone else's expense. You wouldn't know real commitment if it slapped you in the face." The audience gasped, some clapping in agreement with Leavitt's sharp words. Rock, visibly shaken for the first time since taking the stage, took a step back, but he wasn't done yet. "You're defending her pretty hard for someone who's just a spokesperson. What's your real stake in this, Karoline?" Leavitt met his gaze head on. "My stake is defending the truth, Chris. Something you've clearly lost sight of in your pursuit of laughs and ratings." Her voice was ice cold, the calm before the storm. "You can make up as many stories as you want, but the truth doesn't need embellishment. Melania Trump is a dedicated First Lady, not a prisoner. She's worked for this country for over 20 years, and you're sitting here trying to tear her down with a joke." Rock's smirk faltered, but he quickly tried to regain control. "I've got 50 million followers, Karoline. What do you have? A White House desk and some carefully prepared stats?" Leavitt raised an eyebrow. "I don't need followers. I have the truth. And tonight, the truth is what's winning. You can keep throwing out those tired jokes, but they won't change the facts." The battle had officially begun. Rock, usually in full control of the crowd, was now struggling to hold on to his footing as Karoline Leavitt continued to dismantle his arguments one by one. The audience's energy was shifting. The cheers for Rock were less enthusiastic, while the applause for Leavitt was growing louder with every word. Rock tried again. "Oh, so now I'm just a clown, huh? You think you can take me down with your stats and your facts? Well, let's talk about those facts, Karoline. The truth is Melania has only been seen with Trump in public a handful of times. What does that say about their relationship?" Leavitt didn't hesitate. It says that Melania doesn't need to prove herself in the public eye. Unlike you, who thrives on attention and validation, she's chosen to focus on the work that matters. You don't get to define her based on your shallow interpretation of the facts. You say she's stuck, but I see a woman who chose to stay and work for the good of this country. The audience was now firmly on Leavitt's side. The public display of her calm and collected rebuttals had turned the tide. Rock, visibly losing his cool, took a step back and gripped the mic harder, trying to salvage his position. But it was clear. Karoline Leavitt was winning this exchange not just with facts, but with grace and poise. As the audience continued to buzz with energy, Chris Rock could feel the tide turning against him. The crowd that had once roared in approval of his jokes was now visibly quieter, with more and more people siding with Karoline Leavitt. The back and forth was becoming less of a battle of humor and more of a political showdown, with the White House press secretary strategically dismantling Rock's humorous jabs with calm, calculated responses. Inside his mind, Rock was battling more than just his opponent on stage. He was wrestling with the specter of his own pride. This wasn't just a comedy roast, it was personal. He had built his career on being the voice of truth, cutting through the noise with humor that revealed uncomfortable realities about the powerful, the wealthy, and the political elite. And now, he was being outplayed, not by someone with the same tools he had, but by a woman wielding the weapon of facts. As the debate continued, Rock tried to maintain control, but his usual confidence had started to falter. Every quip he made was met with well-argued rebuttals from Leavitt, and with each passing moment, his frustration mounted. Rock's mind raced as Karoline Leavitt continued to speak. Her calm, deliberate tone was infuriating. In his world, things were supposed to be black and white. A joke was a joke, and everyone could laugh at it or get offended by it. But Leavitt wasn't playing by those rules. She was taking everything he threw at her, dissecting it with precision, and turning it back on him with facts and data. For the first time in years, Rock found himself questioning his own words. The sharp humor that had been his trademark now felt hollow in comparison to the evidence Leavitt was presenting. He'd spent years perfecting his comedy routines, tearing down the powerful, showing the world the absurdity of politics, the media, and the privileged. And yet, here was Leavitt, a woman with none of the comedic flair, none of the charm, beating him at his own game. She wasn't cracking jokes. She was cracking open the truth, layer by layer. What hurt even more was the growing support for her in the studio. The audience, who had once embraced his humor, was now siding with her. Her calm demeanor, her unwavering conviction, her ability to stand her ground and articulate the facts had made her an unlikely but formidable adversary. Rock could feel the sweat building on his palms as he clutched the microphone tighter. He needed a win. He needed to come out on top, to remind everyone that he was the one who called the shots when it came to this kind of verbal sparring. But with every word that left Leavitt's lips, he felt himself losing his grip on the situation. Karoline Leavitt, on the other hand, was thriving in the moment. As each of Rock's jokes fell flat, she stood her ground with a quiet strength. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just defending Melania Trump, she was defending the very notion of truth. And in the face of Rock's bravado, it wasn't the jokes that mattered, it was the facts. With each statement she made, she grew more resolute. The more Rock tried to deflect with his typical self-assuredness, the more Leavitt's composed responses resonated with the audience. She wasn't just responding to him, she was calling out his hypocrisy. She wasn't allowing him to turn serious matters into the punchlines of a stand-up routine. She was treating the situation with the gravity it deserved. "Chris," she said, her voice cutting through the studio like a knife. "You say Melania is trapped in a gilded cage, but I see a woman who chose to stand by her husband through everything, from the campaign trail to the White House. And unlike you, she doesn't need to get laughs at others' expense. She works tirelessly for the children, for the cause she believes in." Rock, trying to regain his footing, muttered under his breath, "Yeah, but who's counting the cost of that, huh? Who's watching her slowly fade away in public?" Leavitt didn't flinch. "The world is watching, Chris. But unlike you, they're watching with respect. Melania doesn't need to smile in every photo to prove her worth. She's been through more in the public eye than most of us can even imagine. And through it all, she's remained strong. You wouldn't understand that kind of strength. As the conversation continued, it became clear that the audience was beginning to favor Leavitt. The earlier support for Rock's jokes had turned into a mixture of awkward silence and reluctant admiration for Leavitt's factual arguments. Samantha Pierce, sensing that the tides had shifted, tried to steer the conversation back to lighter ground, but it was clear that the damage had been done. The real victory wasn't in making people laugh. It wasn't even in making a funny quip. The true win in this moment was in the way Leavitt had handled herself. She had turned a potentially ugly argument into a battle of intellect, proving that facts, when delivered with conviction, could win over even the most cynical of crowds. Outside the studio, social media was already ablaze with posts from the audience, commentators, and fans. Leavitt's calm, measured responses had captured the attention of millions. While Rock had been the star of the show, it was Leavitt who had emerged as the true victor. Almost instantly, memes began flooding social media. The hashtag #RockViLeavitt trended, but this time, it wasn't Rock's sharp comebacks that were being shared. It was Leavitt's composed counterpoints. The world was watching as she tore down Rock's defenses with nothing more than facts. One meme showed Leavitt standing tall while Rock appeared small and frazzled beside her with the caption, "When the truth hits harder than a joke." Another post read, "Chris Rock tried to make a joke about Melania, but Karoline Leavitt turned it into a masterclass in truth." Rock, who had once commanded the spotlight with his comedic prowess, was now being overshadowed by a political figure whose quiet strength and command of facts had won the day. The meme storm continued, and with each passing minute, the public's perception of Leavitt grew stronger. Back in Rock's dressing room, the storm was far from over. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, he stormed off stage, the tension of the debate weighing on him. He was furious, pacing in the green room, his hands running through his hair. He had been bested, and the knowledge gnawed at him. How could someone like Karoline Leavitt, someone who had never had to deal with an audience's laughter, defeat him with nothing but cold, hard facts? His manager, Tony, entered the room, his face filled with concern. Tony had been with Rock for years, through thick and thin, but even he could see that Rock was unraveling. "Chris," Tony said gently, "you need to calm down. You've got fans who love you. You've still got a massive following." Rock turned on him, his eyes wild. "No, Tony. She embarrassed me. She made me look like a fool in front of millions. I'm not going to let some 27-year-old punk humiliate me like that. I'm Chris Rock. I don't lose." Tony sighed, his voice soft but firm. "Chris, she didn't just win the argument. She won the respect. She had facts on her side. You can't yell your way through that." Rock slammed his fist onto the table. "I'm not done. I'll go live on Instagram. I'll take her down. I'm not letting her get the last word. Not like this." After the show wrapped up and the studio lights dimmed, Chris Rock stormed off stage, the weight of the night's events hanging over him like a dark cloud. He could feel the audience's energy shift away from him. The laughter that had once filled the studio now felt like it was echoing in his ears, mocking him as he walked backstage. He entered his dressing room, the door slamming shut behind him. His pulse raced, and the sweat on his palms made the mic feel slippery. For the first time in a long while, he felt powerless. Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary of all people, had bested him with nothing but facts, stats, and a calm, composed demeanor. It was almost like being caught in a trap he hadn't even known was set. Rock paced back and forth, muttering to himself as his manager, Tony, sat silently on the couch, watching him with a concerned expression. The tension in the room was palpable. "Chris," Tony started, trying to keep his voice steady, "you've got to take a step back. You've got the crowd on your side. You've got your fans. You just need to let the dust settle." Rock spun around, his eyes blazing with frustration. "You don't get it, Tony. She made me look like an amateur. I'm Chris Rock. I've been in this game longer than she's been in politics, and I'm not going to let some press secretary take me down like this." Tony sighed, rubbing his temples. "She played hard, Chris. But you know what? She's got the facts, and she's got the people's respect. You can't fight that with jokes." "I'm not fighting her with jokes," Rock shot back, his voice rising. "I'm fighting with the truth, and I'm going to show the world that I wasn't wrong. I'll go live. I'll set the record straight. I'm not going to let her win just because she knows how to speak calmly and throw around stats." Minutes later, Rock was in front of his camera, setting up his phone for a live stream. His face was tight with anger, but there was also an unmistakable hint of defiance in his eyes. His followers, millions of them, were waiting. This was his platform, this was his domain, and no one, especially not Karoline Leavitt, was going to take that from him. The live stream popped up on his Instagram feed, and within seconds the numbers spiked. Over 200,000 viewers flooded into the live stream, their comments flying in at lightning speed. The chat exploded with mixed messages, some urging Rock to get her back, while others expressed support for Leavitt, calling her the real winner. Rock's voice was raspy, but there was an energy in his words that suggested he wasn't ready to give up. "Yo, everybody," he said, his tone louder than usual. "I just left that crazy talk show, and I'm not going to let some kid like Karoline Leavitt think she can take me down. I'm Chris Rock. I don't lose to anyone, especially not some spokesperson reading stats off a piece of paper like a robot." He paused, glaring at the camera, his fingers twitching with the urge to keep talking. "You hear that, Karoline? You can stand there, throwing out all your charity numbers, your fake facts, but we all know what's real. Melania Trump is a luxury prisoner. She doesn't need to be a part of your White House press secretary nonsense. I say what people are thinking. Melania wrote that divorce paper the day Trump stared into an eclipse like a fool." Rock's words began to spill out faster as he got more worked up. "I don't need stats. I've got eyes. You say Melania's out there hosting 50 charity events? I bet she's just doing that to avoid spending time with Trump. I've got stats too. Trump went bankrupt 6 times. 6 times. Casinos, airlines, Trump University, all of them failures. But Melania? She's his biggest failure." The comments on the stream exploded with rapid-fire responses. "Right on, Chris. Melania deserves better. Karoline can't handle Rock." Some people were cheering him on, but the overall tone was starting to shift. Rock v. Leavitt was trending, but it wasn't because of Rock's comeback. It was becoming a battle between Rock's raw emotions and Leavitt's calm, factual demeanor. Rock, trying to maintain his footing, raised his voice even higher. "I'm not washed up. I made $20 million off one Netflix special. How much did Leavitt make? $180 grand. Come on, I've got millions of followers. I'm going to show everyone who's the real winner here." He slammed his fist onto the table, breathing heavily. As his followers flooded the chat with a mixture of support and skepticism, Rock's confidence started to slip. The audience's energy wasn't with him as much as it had been. The more he shouted, the more his words felt empty. It wasn't working. While Rock was making his live stream rant, Karoline Leavitt sat back at the White House, her eyes scanning the responses on her phone. She'd already seen the memes, the posts, the hashtags. Hashtag Rock v. Leavitt had exploded across social media. But what struck her the most wasn't the jokes or the memes. It was the way the public was reacting. Leavitt's own social media presence had skyrocketed after the show. Comments flooded in not just from political commentators, but from ordinary people. The overwhelming sentiment was clear. Leavitt had won. She wasn't a comedian, but she didn't need to be. She had turned the tables with facts, with a clear-headed argument that had forced Rock to retreat into anger and noise. She had stayed calm under pressure, focusing on the truth, while Rock had relied on his celebrity status and outdated jokes. Her team had already drafted a statement, and it was quickly being pushed out across various platforms. Chris Rock can yell as loud as he wants, but truth doesn't need a microphone. The post quickly gained thousands of likes and retweets. The phrase became a rallying cry for those who had been waiting for someone to challenge Rock's unchecked power in the world of comedy. Back in Rock's apartment in Los Angeles, Tony could see the situation spiraling. The views on Rock's live stream had peaked at 2 million, but the number of viewers was rapidly dropping. Comments were pouring in, but the mood had shifted. People weren't laughing as much. They were questioning Rock's anger, his inability to stay on topic, and his reliance on outdated jokes. Karoline Leavitt had won, not just in the studio, but in the court of public opinion. Tony watched as Rock, still pacing in his apartment, tried to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. The comments section of the live stream was filled with criticism. "You're yelling too much," one comment said. Leavitt crushed you, man, said another. Rock paused, standing still for a moment before slamming his fist on the table again. I'm not losing, he muttered, but the certainty in his voice had faded. The stream ended abruptly, the screen going black.